the scream that broke her world. The late afternoon sun dipped behind the clouds, washing the playground in soft golden light. Laughter echoed through the crisp autumn air, mingled with the squeak of swings and the rumble of children's sneakers racing across the ground. Emma Rodriguez sat on a worn wooden bench near the sandbox, a red pen in her hand, papers balanced on her lap, and her tired eyes occasionally flicking up to watch her 5-year-old son, Jaime, playing on the jungle gym. Her boy was all energy and light, a whirlwind of laughter and scraped knees, the living proof that her hardest years had still been worth surviving. Every shout, every giggle reminded her that she had built something beautiful out of her pain, a life for the two of them. Simple but safe, far away from the ghosts of the past she had tried so hard to bury. It happened in a blink. A scream cut through the air, sharp, desperate, and unlike any she had ever heard from her son. Emma's head jerked up instinctively. Her papers scattered as she jumped to her feet, her heart hammering so fast it felt like her ribs might shatter. The world seemed to move in slow motion as her eyes locked on the slide. Jaime lay crumpled at the bottom, his small frame twisted awkwardly, one arm bent at an angle that made her stomach turn. The cheerful red slide, the one he had begged her to take him to every weekend, suddenly looked monstrous, a silent witness to her child's pain. Without thinking, she sprinted across the playground, her sandals slipping on the mulch, her breath caught somewhere between prayer and panic. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands trembling as she brushed the hair from his forehead. "Jaime, baby, talk to me," she whispered, her voice shaking even as she fought to stay calm. His big brown eyes, glassy with tears, blinked up at her. "Mommy, it hurts," he whimpered, clutching his arm. She could see it clearly. The unnatural bend, the swelling already forming beneath the skin. Years ago, before her life had taken a sharp turn, she had been a nursing student, and that old training came rushing back like muscle memory. It was a fracture, no doubt about it. The thought made her breath hitch, but she pushed the fear down. Panic wouldn't help him now. "It's okay, sweetheart, Mommy's here," she said softly, gathering him into her arms. His body was small, but at that moment, he felt heavier than the world. She held him close, rocking him gently as tears spilled from his eyes. Another parent, Mrs. Patterson from Jaime's class, came rushing over, keys already in hand. "Emma, I'll drive you! My car's right there," she said urgently. Emma nodded, grateful beyond words, and carried her son toward the parking lot, whispering comfort into his ear with every step. The drive to Riverside General Hospital felt endless. Jaime had stopped crying by the time they reached the main road, but every little whimper felt like a knife twisting deeper into Emma's chest. She kept her hand on his knee, glancing between him and the traffic ahead, murmuring reassurances she barely believed herself. "It's going to be okay, baby. The doctors are going to fix your arm. You're going to be good as new. I promise." Her voice cracked on the last word. The closer they got, the harder her heart pounded. She hadn't been to that hospital in 5.5 years, not since the day she gave birth to the boy now crying beside her. The memories of that day, of the man who had unknowingly helped create the child in her arms, came flooding back, as vivid and painful as if it had happened yesterday. Riverside General stood at the end of the street like a fortress of glass and steel, its lights flickering in the early evening haze. The second Emma saw the ER sign, her pulse quickened, not just from fear, but from something else, something old and unresolved buried deep beneath years of silence. She pushed the feeling down, focusing only on her son. Inside the emergency room, chaos reigned as nurses hurried from bed to bed, monitors beeped steadily, and anxious parents clutched their children close. Emma held Jaime tightly as they reached the triage desk. A gray-haired nurse took one look at the child's bent arm and immediately ushered them past the waiting area. "Room 3. We'll get a doctor right away," she called out, motioning to a young orderly. Emma settled Jaime on the narrow hospital bed, smoothing his hair back as she tried to stay composed. "It hurts, Mommy," he whimpered again, looking up at her with tearful eyes. "I know, sweetheart," she whispered, kissing his forehead. "You're so brave, Jaime, So brave. The curtain swayed open briefly as the nurse poked her head in. Doctor will be right with you, ma'am. Emma nodded, murmuring a thank you as she sat down beside her son. The antiseptic smell made her chest tighten. It reminded her of another night, one filled with heartbreak instead of fear, and she wished she could shut her mind off completely. Footsteps echoed just outside the curtain. Emma looked up, expecting an older physician, someone detached and professional. But when the curtain was pulled aside, she froze. Time seemed to stop, her breath catching in her throat. The clipboard slipped from the doctor's hand, clattering onto the tile floor. For a moment, there was only stunned silence between them, 6 years of distance collapsing in an instant. "Emma," he said finally, his voice low, trembling. She felt her pulse stutter. His name rose unbidden to her lips like a prayer she'd sworn never to say again. "Nathan," Dr. Nathan Cross stood before her, his dark hair a little shorter than she remembered, his face marked by years of exhaustion and experience. But those green eyes, those eyes she had once trusted with everything, hadn't changed. He looked exactly as he did the night she walked away from him, carrying a secret he never knew existed. Jaime stirred on the bed, blinking up at the stranger in the white coat. "Mommy, is this the doctor?" he asked innocently, his small voice slicing through the tension. Emma's throat felt dry, but she managed to nod. "Yes, sweetheart. This is Dr. Cross. He's going to help you." Nathan tore his gaze from her and knelt beside the bed, his professional mask slipping into place, though his hands trembled faintly as he reached for the boy's arm. "Hey there, buddy. Can you tell me what happened?" Jaime sniffled. "I was being a superhero, and I fell." Nathan smiled softly. "Ah, a brave superhero. I've treated a few of those today." He examined the arm carefully, his touch gentle but confident. "Looks like you might have a fracture, but we'll get you fixed up in no time, okay?" As he worked, Emma watched him in silence, memories flashing unbidden, late-night study sessions, whispered promises, the first kiss they shared under the hospital stairwell, and the night everything fell apart when she found out he had chosen his career over their future. She had left before he could come back, too hurt, too proud, and too terrified of what might happen if she stayed. She told herself she would never see him again. But life had a way of circling back to unfinished chapters. The X-ray technician arrived, and Nathan looked at Emma. "We'll need to take some images to confirm the break. It won't take long." As the nurse wheeled Jaime toward radiology, Nathan turned to her. "Emma, can we talk while they're doing the scans?" She hesitated. Every instinct told her to run, but she nodded. "All right." They stepped into the hallway, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead. For a moment, neither spoke. Nathan rubbed the back of his neck, the same old nervous habit she remembered. "I can't believe you're here," he said softly. "You just disappeared, Emma. No calls. No letters, nothing. And now—" His voice trailed off. She met his gaze, her own filled with years of pain she had never spoken aloud. "Now my son needs a doctor," she said quietly. "That's all that matters tonight." Nathan swallowed hard, but his eyes flicked with something else, something sharp and knowing. "He's 5? She froze. Her breath caught. "He's 5.5, she whispered. The words hung between them like a storm about to break. Nathan's expression shifted, realization dawning, disbelief and something like heartbreak flooding his face. But before he could speak, the technician returned, calling for the doctor to review the X-rays. The moment shattered, leaving only silence and unfinished truth behind. Emma followed him back into the room, her legs weak. Jaime was smiling now, fascinated by the glowing images of his bones on the screen. "Look, Mommy." "That's my arm," he said proudly. Nathan smiled faintly. "You've got a clean break, superhero. We'll put a cast on that arm, and in a few weeks you'll be good as new." Jaime grinned. "Can it be blue? Like Superman?" "Blue it is," Nathan replied, his voice soft. "The strongest blue we've got." As he began casting the arm, Emma watched the two of them together, her heart aching in ways she couldn't describe. The way Jaime looked at Nathan, with instant trust and admiration, mirrored the way she once had. And the way Nathan smiled at the boy made her realize something deep and frightening. Love had a way of finding its way back, even when buried under years of silence. When the cast was done, Jaime looked down at his arm proudly. "I'm a real superhero now," he said brightly. Nathan smiled, but his eyes were on Emma. "He's amazing," he said quietly. "You've done an incredible job, Emma." She nodded, blinking back tears. "Thank you for helping him." Nathan reached for a notepad and scribbled something down, then handed her a small card. "This is my direct number. If anything feels off, call me, day or night." Their fingers brushed as she took it. The brief contact sent a rush of emotion through both of them, longing, regret, and something that had never truly died. She slipped the card into her pocket without a word. As they left the room, Jaime turned back and waved with his good arm. "Bye, Dr. Cross." "Thanks for my supercast." Nathan smiled faintly. "Take care, superhero." But his eyes remained on Emma until she disappeared through the sliding doors, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air, the same scent he remembered from the night she walked away. For the first time in years, Nathan felt something awaken inside him, a truth he wasn't ready to face, but could no longer ignore. And somewhere deep inside, Emma knew this wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning of the reckoning that had been waiting since the night she left him, and the night Jaime was born. The past that refused to stay buried. Night after the hospital visit stretched endlessly for Emma. The sound of the rain against the window should have been soothing, but it only deepened the quiet ache that filled the small apartment she shared with her son. Jaime had finally fallen asleep, his small body curled up on the couch, his arm propped gently on a pillow as the bright blue cast rested across his chest. The faint hum of the heater filled the silence, but inside her chest her heart felt louder than the storm outside. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Nathan's face again. That same stunned expression when realization flickered in his eyes, that silent question he hadn't asked, but that she had seen forming on his lips. She had run from it once before, but now, with fate cruelly binding their paths again, she wasn't sure she could hide much longer. She sat at the kitchen table, the hospital discharge papers spread before her. But her mind wasn't on the ink or the instructions. Her gaze was unfocused, drifting back to memories she had worked years to bury. She had met Nathan Cross during her second year of nursing school. He was a final-year medical student with a reputation for brilliance and a smile that could disarm even the most guarded soul. She had been shy, working nights at a diner to pay tuition, never expecting to catch the attention of someone like him. But Nathan had noticed her. He had seen past her quietness, her thrift store clothes, her tired eyes, and instead had fallen for her laughter, the warmth she tried to hide behind discipline and dreams. They had spent countless nights under the hospital's rooftop lights, sharing coffee, sharing plans, dreaming of a future where medicine and love walked hand in hand. She had believed that together they could face anything, until the day everything fell apart. It was the year he got his residency offer, a once-in-a-lifetime position in another state, far from Riverside. She had been proud of him at first, bursting with happiness for the man she loved. But when she told him she couldn't follow right away because her mother had fallen ill, his reaction had shaken her. He had begged her to come anyway, promising he'd take care of her, promising it would all work out. Yet behind his promises, there had been frustration, an impatience she hadn't seen before. He wanted a clean start, a perfect life, a future unburdened by responsibility. She wanted family, love, and patience. The argument had stretched into weeks of silence. Then one day he left, without even a goodbye, only a letter left in her mailbox saying he was sorry, that he needed to build his dream before he could be the man she deserved. That same week, she discovered she was pregnant. Emma closed her eyes now, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table as tears stung her eyes. She had been terrified, alone, and 23, carrying the child of a man who didn't even know he existed. She had wanted to tell him so many times, she even dialed his number once, but fear stopped her. Fear that he'd see her as a burden, fear that he'd feel trapped. Fear that his world, full of ambition and precision, had no place for messy love or an unexpected child. So she did the only thing she knew. She left Riverside and started over in a small town 2 hours away. She worked part-time as a substitute teacher, rented a small apartment, and built a quiet life where no one asked too many questions. Every day she looked into Jaime's eyes, those unmistakable green eyes, and reminded herself that love didn't have to come from two people. She could be enough. But seeing Nathan again had broken that illusion. The way he had looked at Jaime, not just as a doctor, but as something more, something instinctive, it scared her. It made her heart ache in ways she hadn't felt in years. The next morning, Emma woke early, her body heavy with exhaustion, her mind still restless. Jaime was still sleeping peacefully, clutching his little stuffed dinosaur. She smiled faintly and brushed a hand through his hair before slipping out of the apartment to grab groceries. But as she returned, juggling bags at the door, her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize flashed on the screen. For a second, her heart stilled. She didn't need to guess who it was. "Hello?" she said softly, pressing the phone to her ear. "Emma," came that familiar voice. Deep, steady, professional, but softer than she remembered. "It's Nathan, Dr. Cross." She swallowed hard, trying to sound composed. "Is everything okay? Is it about Jaime?" "No, yes, he's fine," Nathan replied quickly. I wanted to check on him, to make sure he slept all right. Sometimes kids have pain or swelling after the cast sets." Emma's heart softened despite herself. "He's fine. Slept through the night. He's proud of that blue cast. Says he's a real superhero now." Nathan chuckled quietly on the other end. "That sounds like him. He's a great kid, Emma." There was a pause. Then his voice lowered, almost hesitant. "Listen, I know this might be out of line, but could we talk? Not as doctor and patient. As—" he stopped mid-sentence, his breath unsteady. "As two people who have some unfinished things between them." Emma's heart raced. Part of her wanted to say no, to keep the wall standing between them. But another part, the part that had spent 5 years pretending not to wonder, needed to know what he'd say. "All right," she said finally. "But not here. There's a coffee shop near the school. Tomorrow at 5. "I'll be there," Nathan said quietly. When the line went dead, Emma stood still, staring at the phone in her hand. The morning light fell across the room, illuminating Jaime's toys scattered across the floor, little symbols of a life she had built alone. And yet now, it all felt fragile, as if one conversation could shatter the balance she had fought so hard to protect. The next day came faster than she expected. The coffee shop near Riverside Elementary was a cozy little place that smelled of roasted beans and nostalgia. Emma arrived a few minutes early, her heart pounding as she sat by the window. She told herself she was there for closure, not for forgiveness, not for love, just to end the chapter she never got to finish. But when Nathan walked in, tall and composed in a simple gray shirt and jeans, her heart betrayed her. He looked older, yes, but somehow even more grounded, more human than the boy she had once loved. He spotted her immediately and offered a cautious smile before sitting down across from her. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the espresso machine and the quiet chatter of other patrons filled the space between them. Finally, Nathan broke the silence. "You left without saying goodbye," he said softly. "I looked for you, Emma, I really did. But you were gone. No trace. And now I understand why." She looked down at her cup, her fingers tracing the rim. "You had your dream, Nathan. You didn't need me holding you back. Is that what you think?" His voice was low, hurt seeping through the calm. "You weren't holding me back, Emma. You were the only reason I believed I could make it. You were my balance. And when I came back, when I wanted to fix things, you were gone." Her throat tightened. "I had to leave. I didn't know how to tell you that I was pregnant." The words fell between them like a hammer. Nathan froze. His eyes widened, his breath caught audibly, and for a moment, he simply stared at her as if trying to absorb the impossible. "You what?" he whispered. She met his gaze at last, tears filling her eyes. "Jaime is your son, Nathan." Time seemed to stop. The noise of the coffee shop faded, leaving only the sound of his unsteady breathing. Nathan leaned back, running a hand through his hair as if trying to steady himself. 5 years. Emma, 5 years. You raised him alone? She nodded, her lips trembling. I didn't want to destroy your career. You had your chance at everything you ever dreamed of. I didn't want you to feel trapped. Trapped? His voice rose slightly, though still gentle. Emma, I would have given up everything to be there for you. For him. You think I cared more about medicine than you? She looked up at him, pain flashing through her eyes. You left, Nathan. You left when I needed you the most. How could I believe you'd stay? His face softened then, guilt written all over it. He reached across the table, his hand hovering for a second before she let him take hers. I made mistakes, Emma, big ones. But if I had known, if I had even guessed, I would have come running back. Every single day since you left, I wondered where you were. And now, knowing I have a son, his voice broke, the words trembling on his lips. I've lost 5 years of his life. 5 years I can never get back. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she didn't pull her hand away. I was scared, she whispered. Scared you'd choose resentment over love. That you'd look at me and see the girl who ruined your dream? Nathan's thumb brushed against her hand. Emma, my dream was never just medicine. It was you. It was the life we talked about. The family we wanted. And I can't change the past, but I don't want to lose another second of the future. For a moment, everything stilled. The air between them seemed to hum with the quiet pulse of old love reawakening, fragile, uncertain, but real. Then Nathan's phone buzzed, breaking the moment. He glanced at it, frowning. I'm on call, he said softly. Emergency shift tonight, but please, let me see him tomorrow. Let me at least meet my son properly. Emma hesitated, the battle raging behind her eyes. But finally, she nodded. Tomorrow after school, she whispered. He'll be at the park. Nathan exhaled, relief washing over his face. Thank you. As he stood and left, Emma sat frozen, staring at the door long after he was gone. Her heart was a storm, fear, hope, guilt, love, all tangled into one unbearable ache. She knew this was only the beginning. The truth had finally been spoken, but healing it would take more than words. And as the rain began to fall again outside the cafe window, Emma whispered to herself the same silent prayer she had whispered 5 years ago. That somehow, love would find a way to forgive what time had broken. The park where truth began to heal. The following afternoon, the park was alive with laughter, rustling leaves, and the distant hum of life moving on. The late sunshine spilled like honey across the playground, catching in the strands of children's hair as they ran, shouted, and played without care. But for Emma, standing near the bench under the old oak tree, the world felt suspended in a fragile stillness. Every second felt heavier than the last, every breath slower, sharper, edged with anticipation and fear. She had spent the entire morning trying to calm the chaos inside her heart, telling herself she was doing the right thing, that Nathan deserved to see his son, that Jaime deserved the truth. And yet, now that the moment had come, her hands trembled slightly as she watched her boy run clumsily across the grass, his bright blue cast glinting in the sunlight as he chased after a paper airplane. Jaime's laughter echoed in the breeze, innocent and pure, untouched by the complexities surrounding him. Emma's chest tightened as she realized how much was about to change for him, for both of them. For 5 years, their world had been simple. Small apartment, early mornings, bedtime stories, pancakes on Sundays. Every scar, every lesson, every victory had been theirs alone. Now another presence was about to step into that sacred circle. The man who had unknowingly given her both her greatest love and her deepest wound. She heard his voice before she saw him. It was a sound that had lived in her dreams for years, deep, warm, familiar, but now tinged with hesitation. Emma, she turned slowly. Nathan stood a few steps away, dressed casually in jeans and a simple dark jacket. His hair was a little tousled, and exhaustion still clung faintly to his eyes, but there was something different about him now. A softness, a kind of vulnerability she had never seen before. He wasn't the ambitious young doctor she had fallen in love with years ago. He was something else entirely, a man facing the weight of what he had lost and the hope of what he might still regain. "He's over there," Emma said quietly, gesturing toward the field. Her voice trembled despite her best effort to steady it. "That's Jaime." Nathan followed her gaze, and for a moment he didn't move. His breath caught, his jaw tightened, and his eyes softened in a way that made Emma's own heart twist painfully. There he was, their son, chasing his paper airplane, his laughter carrying across the park. It was as if the world itself paused to let Nathan see what he had missed all these years. The small hands, the messy hair, the light in his eyes, all of it pieces of himself reborn in another life he never knew existed. "Does he know?" Nathan asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma shook her head. "Not yet. I didn't want to confuse him until I knew you were ready." He looked at her then, his expression torn between gratitude and grief. "Emma, I'll never be ready," he said softly. "But I can't stay away now. I want to know him. I want to earn that right no matter how long it takes." She studied him carefully. The sincerity in his voice was undeniable. There was no arrogance, no anger, no blame, only longing and remorse. After a long pause, she nodded slowly. "Then go," she said gently. "Meet your son." Nathan's throat tightened, and for a moment he looked almost afraid. But then he drew a deep breath and stepped forward. Emma watched him walk across the grass toward Jaime, her heart pounding so hard she thought she might faint. Jaime looked up as the shadow of a tall figure fell over him. "Hey there, Superman," Nathan said softly, crouching down so he was eye level with the boy. "You're flying that plane like a pro." Jaime grinned proudly, his face lighting up. "Dr. Cross, you fixed my arm," he said excitedly. "Look, it doesn't hurt anymore." He lifted the casted arm like a trophy. Nathan smiled, his heart catching in his throat. "I can see that. You've got the strongest arm in town now." Jaime laughed. "Mommy says it's because I'm brave." "She's right," Nathan replied gently. "You're one of the bravest kids I've ever met." Emma stood a few feet away, watching the two of them with a mix of awe and heartbreak. The connection between them was instant, natural, effortless, as though some unspoken thread had always existed. Jaime talked animatedly, showing Nathan his toy car, his airplane, and even the scrape on his knee he got saving the world. Nathan listened to every word with the kind of attention and wonder that only a parent could give. Every laugh from Jaime drew a small, quiet smile from Nathan, and every smile made Emma's eyes glisten with tears she didn't want to shed. After a while, Jaime ran toward her, tugging on her hand. "Mommy, can Dr. Cross play with us? He knows about superheroes." Emma hesitated, then smiled softly. "Of course, sweetheart. We can all play together." For the next hour, the three of them existed in a fragile, beautiful bubble. Nathan pushed Jaime on the swings, careful not to jostle his arm, and Emma couldn't help but notice how naturally they moved together, as if the years of absence had been only a pause, not a lifetime. Nathan lifted Jaime up, pretending he was flying like a hero, and the boys' laughter rang through the park, bright and free. Every sound was a reminder of what could have been, the family that might have existed if life had gone differently. As the sun began to sink, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet, Nathan sat on the bench beside Emma while Jaime ran off to chase his toy again. For a long time, neither spoke. They simply watched their son, the child that bound them forever, playing in the golden light. Finally, Nathan broke the silence. "He's perfect," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "Every bit of him. You did that, Emma. You raised him into someone incredible." Emma's lips trembled. "I did my best," she whispered. "Some days were hard, really hard, but every time I looked at him, I saw you, and somehow that gave me strength." Nathan turned toward her, his eyes soft. "You shouldn't have had to do it alone. I'm sorry, and for all of it. For leaving, for not being there, for missing his first steps, his first words, every moment I should have been a part of." Emma shook her head gently. "We can't change what's already done, Nathan. All we can do is decide what comes next. He nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. Then let me try, Emma. Let me be part of his life. I don't expect him to call me anything. I don't expect you to trust me overnight. I want a chance to be his father. Her heart wavered, caught between the past that had wounded her and the hope she had long buried. Nathan, you don't know what you're asking. It's not just about showing up. It's about staying. Every day, no matter how hard it gets. He reached out then, his hand finding hers on the bench. Then I'll stay, he said simply. Whatever it takes. The sincerity in his voice broke something inside her, not in pain, but in release. For years she had carried resentment, fear, and longing like an invisible weight. But now, looking into Nathan's eyes, she saw a man who had grown, who understood loss, who wanted redemption more than pride. She wanted to believe him. Maybe she even needed to. When Jaime came running back, Nathan smiled and scooped him up carefully, spinning him around while the boy giggled uncontrollably. Emma watched them, her chest swelling with emotions she couldn't name. There was something healing in the sight, something sacred in the way love, though fractured and scarred, had found its way back to life. As dusk settled and the park emptied, Nathan walked them to their car. Jaime was yawning, his small head resting on Emma's shoulder. Thank you for today, Nathan said softly. It means more than I can ever say. Emma nodded, her eyes meeting his. We'll see you again soon, she said quietly. Nathan smiled faintly. I'll be here. As she drove away, Nathan stood at the edge of the parking lot, watching the car until its taillights disappeared into the distance. The ache in his chest was sharp, but beneath it was something new, purpose. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Trust would take time, love even longer. But for the first time in years, he felt like he had found the missing piece of himself. Not in success, not in titles, but in a little boy with a blue cast and a smile that mirrored his own. And as Emma glanced at the rearview mirror, watching Nathan fade into the twilight, she whispered to the sleeping boy in her arms, That man you met today, sweetheart? He's more than you know. Her voice broke as she added, almost to herself, He's the part of your story I was too afraid to tell. The night grew quiet around them, but inside both hearts, one in a car, one in a hospital parking lot, something long frozen had begun to thaw. The weeks when love learned to stay, in the weeks that followed the meeting at the park, life began to fold in on itself and then slowly open again like a hand unclenching after a long hold. And every day brought some small new rhythm that felt both frightening and right. Nathan started appearing at the edges of their routines in a way that did not demand space but offered it. He would meet them after school with a paper bag of cinnamon rolls from the corner bakery because Jaime liked the ones. With too many sprinkles, he would carry the backpack without making a show of it. He would walk them to the crosswalk and stand back while mother and son did their silly green light dance. He would kneel to tie a shoelace before Jaime even asked. And when Emma thanked him, he always said the same thing in a tone that made her throat tighten. I'm just glad I get to be here. It was that simple sentence, soft as a prayer, that began to melt the ice around the old wounds. Because it didn't promise eternity or perfection, it promised presence. And presence was what had been missing for 5 long years. It was the medicine that time alone had not given. It was the first small stitch in a tear that ran through 3 lives. His, hers, and the boy who laughed with a blue cast flashing in the sun. On Fridays, when Emma's class painted story scenes with watercolors, Nathan sometimes finished his shift early and drifted to the schoolyard fence. Still in his scrubs, eyes rimmed with fatigue but bright with an eagerness he never tried to hide. And when the dismissal bell rang, he would step forward and ask Jaime about the picture that smeared blue into green because the ocean wanted to hug the forest, and he would listen as if this were a briefing before surgery, as if every detail mattered. And when Jaime tugged his hand and asked if Dr. Cross can come to the library, please, he came, but always after he looked to Emma for that small nod that said yes. We are building something carefully here, not rushing. Not naming before the ground is strong enough to hold a name. And in the library, in a corner of the children's section, where the carpet was a little more threadbare, Nathan read aloud in a voice that had the measured cadence of a healer who had learned to speak calm into chaos. And Emma sat across from them and pretended to grade papers, while her eyes kept lifting to watch father and son lean toward each other over the spine of a book, two heads bent in the same thoughtful angle, two expressions tilting in the same way at a funny sentence, two laughs rising and blending into something that sounded like a chord her heart had been waiting to hear since the very first time Jaime grasped her finger in the hospital. Pink and furious and brand new. Trust did not arrive with trumpets. It arrived like light under a door at dawn, a thin line widening, and it asked for unglamorous, daily proof, like the night Jaime woke crying because the skin under his cast itched so fiercely he could not stand it. And Emma's hands trembled as she tried to soothe him. And the living room clock scraped at her nerves because it said nearly midnight and she had no one to call, except the number on a card she had slipped into a drawer because it scared her to need it. She dialed anyway, and on the third ring Nathan answered, voice husky with sleep, and then instantly alert when he heard Jaime's muffled sobs. "I'm coming," he said, and 20 minutes later he was on the floor beside the couch, with a flashlight and a modified cotton swab, and that blend of medical calm and fatherly patience that made the world feel steadier, explaining in gentle words that the itch meant healing, but that didn't mean they had to be miserable, showing Jaime how to blow slow breaths like a dragon cooling fire while he worked, and when the boy finally dozed, the house fell into a hush so tender Emma almost cried from the sheer ordinariness of it. The low lamp, the hum of the refrigerator, a blanket half slid off a small body, and a man in her doorway whispering, "Text me if he stirs again. I'll keep my phone on the pillow." And the next morning, when she thanked him, trying to be casual, he shook his head and said, "You don't thank me for being his dad." And the word flared in the space between them like a match that might become a hearth if they were brave. Of course, life did not give them only quiet victories. It tested the soft places as soon as they formed. And the first test came in the shape of a form letter that looked harmless until Emma read the letterhead twice. Riverside General, Fellowship Coordination Office, and then a third time. The kind of careful rereading you do when you think you are about to bleed. It announced a prestigious pediatric trauma fellowship reopened mid-year after another candidate withdrew, and it invited Dr. Nathan Cross to revisit his application, and the word revisit felt like a door she had once watched him walk through without turning back. It felt like airports at dawn and goodbye kisses that tasted like hope and salt. It felt like the echo of a night when he chose ambition because he was 23, and the horizon glittered, and neither of them knew what loneliness could do to a soul. She folded the letter with hands that shook and placed it on the counter under the bowl of apples where it could pretend to be something ordinary, but in her chest a storm began, and fear woke its old dogs. He will leave, he will leave, he will leave. And fear is the worst sort of prophet because it keeps speaking until you mistake it for truth. She told herself not to mention it, to wait and see what he said first, but silence is an acid when you are trying to build anything worth keeping. And that evening at the park, while the light slanted gold through the sycamores and Jaime made a fort under the slide for emergency snacks and secret books, Emma handed Nathan the letter and watched his face, watched his eyes darken with the histories it carried. And before he could speak, she flashed the blade she uses when she is braver than she feels. "If you want to go, go. I won't stop you, and I won't let Jaime watch you practice goodbye." And the old Emma, the one who built a cottage out of willpower and worry, hoped that pushing him away first would spare her. But the man before her was not the boy she had left. He was a physician who had stood at bedsides where time ran out, and he had learned to say the truest thing even when his voice shook. He took a long breath, and then the words came slow and sure. "I asked them not to email, Emma. I told them months ago I'm staying because my work matters here, because my mother is an hour away, because I am tired of living out of cartons and plans, and because my son is here. I said no before I knew he was mine. And now my no is not a sacrifice, it is a home." And then he smiled in that quiet way that never felt like a performance. "I am not chasing a horizon. I'm choosing a table where there are crayons and too much glue, and a boy who thinks the moon can hear him if he whispers loud enough. And Emma felt the blade slip from her hand. She felt foolish and relieved and exhausted, and when she apologized for doubting him, he shook his head again, softer this time. We are allowed to be afraid. Let's just not let fear write the ending. They began to practice the bravery of planning. Tiny plans at first. Saturday pancakes with blueberries shaped into initials. A trip to the Science Museum where Jaime pressed his nose against the glass to watch lightning skitter across a plasma globe, and Nathan whispered 100 small wonders into his ear. The kind of facts that plant patience in a child. Then slightly bigger plans, like a calendar taped to the fridge with Nathan Days, starred in green because that was hospital brave color. And Emma surprised herself by how much peace the ink gave her. How something as simple as a square and a star could make her lungs open. And with plans came boundaries, because love that wants to last learns its fences. So they agreed that bedtime stories were theirs to share, but school meetings were for Emma unless she asked. That affection around Jaime would be gentle and slow until he understood the map of his family. That the truth would be told soon but not dropped like a stone. All of it patient work, unglamorous and holy. The second test came the day the cast came off. A Tuesday that smelled like rain, and Jaime was both thrilled and anxious, fluttering like a sparrow on the exam table while Nathan, not as his doctor now but as himself, let a colleague do the procedure so the roles would not blur. The saw buzzed and Jaime stiffened and then tried to be brave, eyes burning, and Emma reached for one hand while Nathan reached for the other, and their three hands made a small bridge across fear. And when the last of the blue shell fell away and his arm lay pale and thin and strange-looking to the boy who had forgotten its shape, Nathan told him about bones, about how they grow stronger where they were once broken, how nature remembers to repair more than it takes. And later, when they were alone in the hallway, he said a version of the same thing to Emma about hearts, and she looked at him for a long moment and then nodded, because she wanted that to be true. That night, Jaime cried because the arm was sore and because change always sneaks sorrow into joy, and Emma lay beside him on the couch until he slept. And when she stood, she found Nathan had dozed in the armchair with a blanket half off his knees and a medical journal open like a shield he had forgotten to hold. And the sight was so ordinary, so domestic. She felt something inside her settle. Yes, this, please. More of this. Of course, the world had its way of noticing when good things tried to grow. Gossip is a cheap wind. And soon whispers began among a few parents at the school gate about the doctor and the teacher and the little boy with the green eyes, and someone tried to turn curiosity into cruelty, suggesting Emma had trapped a man or hidden a child on purpose to keep him. And Emma heard a snatch of it near the bulletin board and felt the old heat of shame rise. The ancient lie that says mothers who choose themselves and their babies are somehow thieves of men's futures. She went home bruised by words she pretended not to. Here and that evening, when Nathan arrived with a bag of groceries and the recipe for a stew his grandmother swore could heal, "Weather," she told him in a voice that tried not to shake, and he listened without the flinch she feared. Then did the kindest thing a man can do for the woman he loves. He believed her without auditioning her pain. He did not rush to fix the unfixable, but simply stood carrying it with her. And the next morning he walked her to the gate and greeted those same parents by name, his tone warm, his presence unashamed. And it is amazing how quickly gossip shrivels when faced with a truth that stands in the sunlight. There was, however, one person whose opinion mattered more than all the others. And the day arrived when Emma felt the decision ripen like fruit that would spoil if left unpicked. She invited Nathan for dinner on a Sunday when the air smelled like cut grass and lemon dish soap. And after tacos that fell apart and laughter that didn't, Jaime built a pillow mountain and insisted they climb it to plant a flag. And when they finally tumbled down in a heap and lay catching their breath, Emma sat up and smoothed the boy's hair and told him as simply as she could the story she had waited 5 years to tell. How once there was a man she loved who loved her. How life pulled them apart before they were ready. How a gift came anyway, bright and loud and hungry, and how she chose that gift with everything she had. She said the man's name, not Dr. Cross, but Nathan. Said it like a truth and not a secret. And Jaime looked from her face to the man on the carpet. Confusion warring with wonder. And then Nathan spoke in a voice that broke. I should have been here sooner. I didn't know. And I am so sorry. And he put his hand on his own chest, as if to hold his heart still while it trembled. If you will let me, I would like to be your dad. One day at a time. The kind that shows up. The kind that learns. The kind that stays. And there was a long quiet full of tiny breaths, and the whir of the ceiling fan, and the wild beat of 3 hearts. And then Jaime did what children do when we don't clutter their knowing. He crawled forward, pressed his palm to Nathan's cheek as if he were checking for fever, then tucked himself under Nathan's arm with the solemnity of a ceremony no adult had staged, and whispered into his shirt, Do dads know how to build bigger pillow mountains? And Nathan closed his eyes because sometimes joy is too bright to look at straight on. We can learn, he said, and the boy nodded like a king granting a title. Afterward, there were tears and too many smiles and a shaky bedtime where questions arrived like fireflies. Where did you go? Will you go again? Do dads like dinosaurs? And each one was answered with care, with apology when needed, with promises that did not overreach, with a map drawn not to scale, but with all the landmarks labeled love. Yet even on the night of this grace, another tremor moved under the floorboards. A quieter trouble with sharper teeth, because life loves its counterpoint. And it came when a case at the hospital grew complicated. An accident, a child, a choice. And Nathan stayed past dawn while his phone died in a locker. And the next morning, a social worker from school could not reach either. Adult because Emma had left her. Phone on silent after a midnight fever check, and they filed a routine wellness concern, the way systems do when boxes require ticks. And by late afternoon, a stranger with a clipboard knocked on Emma's door, asking careful questions in careful tones that still felt like an interrogation she had not prepared for. And though the visit was brief and the woman kind, the panic it summoned was primal. Emma's hands were steady for Jaime's sake. But after bedtime, she sat alone at the kitchen table and shook with a rage that tasted like fear. One letter, one rumor, one missed call, one stranger's list. And the fragile safety she had hand-built could be treated like an equation to be solved by someone who did not know the nights or the sacrifices or the way her boy said good morning like a song. When Nathan finally arrived, gray with exhaustion and grief-stricken from a shift that had taken a small life and placed it in a heaven he could not follow, he found her there, tears unshed and jaw set. And she told him everything in a voice that ran flat like a river after a flood. And he listened and did the other kindest thing love can do. He did not take it personally. Did not sprint toward fixes, he simply said, We will make a plan. And we steadied her like a handrail in the dark. So they made their plan, not for courtrooms or battles they did not yet face, but for ordinary protections, emergency contact forms updated in bold, a written schedule for pickups and bedtimes on school letterhead, his name added where it could be added, his presence formalized where informality had left chinks, a shared folder with medical notes and school newsletters so neither missed the call that matters. And they made a second plan whose lines were harder to write because they required the bravery of the heart. If fear yells, we will speak softly. If shame knocks, we will answer with truth. If either of us feels the old ghosts creeping in with their clever arguments, we will say so before they build houses in our silence. And when they finished writing, when the papers were stacked and clipped and slid into a drawer, not as secrets but as tools, they poured tea and sat across from each other and let the quiet hold them. And Emma looked around her small kitchen with its chipped mug and its too bright magnet alphabet and thought, strange and miraculous, this is what rebuilding looks like. Not fireworks, not fog machines, but a man's weary hands around a warm cup and a boy asleep down the hall who had asked tonight, If dads stay, do they get to tuck in again? And had been told yes. They do. Yes, outside the streetlight hummed, and far away a siren rose and fell, and inside, 2 people who had once failed each other in youthful ways sat with the gravity of those who have learned love's real weight, which is not grand gestures but durable kindness, The held tongue, the clarified plan, the practiced apology, the patient boundary, the ordinary meal eaten together after difficult news. And while they sat there, the future did not arrive with answers, but it arrived with chairs pulled out, with room made, with the murmured decision that tomorrow they would tell Jaime about middle names and how they could share one if he wanted, about photographs in shoeboxes that could be framed, about grandparents who would cry in kitchens miles away when they heard the news, about a birthday coming that might be celebrated this year with a cake iced lopsided by hands that do not yet know how to be a team but want to learn. And when Nathan left that night, he stood in the doorway and said not goodbye, but tomorrow at 7. And Emma smiled because schedules can be love, letters when you've lived too long on, maybe, and in the deepest part of the night, when the house had stilled and the old ghosts came to check the locks, Emma walked to her son's door and watched the rise and fall of sleep and whispered the truth she had been afraid to believe. He isn't leaving. Not this time, and across town in a small apartment where the couch carried the imprint of a man who had fallen asleep reading about fractures that heal stronger. Nathan set an alarm that he did not need because fathers wake before clocks when love has finally found them. And an hour before dawn, he opened his eyes with the quiet certainty of a vow, ready to trade brilliance for presence, ready to trade the horizon for a home, ready to stay. The morning after the storm by. The time winter began to pale into spring. The rhythm they had fought so hard to build had started to feel like breathing. The mornings carried a kind of quiet that did not ask for permission. There were 3 mugs instead of 2 on the counter, a pair of sneakers smaller than the others by the door, and a refrigerator covered in drawings that told the story of a family learning how to belong to itself again. It was not perfect. Perfection had never been their goal. But it was real, and that was enough. Emma woke earlier now, sometimes to prepare Jaime's lunch, sometimes just to watch the lights spill across the floor while the city still yawned awake. She would listen for the faint sound of Nathan humming in the bathroom as he helped their son brush his teeth, and she would smile at the way the years of absence seemed to fold themselves into that ordinary sound. Healing, she was learning, did not arrive in grand speeches or apologies carved in marble. It arrived in these small, tender repetitions in mornings that did not hurt. Hours later, Nathan emerged from the corridor, his scrubs wrinkled, his face drawn but steady. "It's not what we feared," he said, kneeling before her. "A viral infection, nothing more. He just needs rest and fluids." Emma's legs went weak with relief, and before she realized what she was doing, she had thrown her arms around him, the weight of years and fear collapsing into the space between them. For a moment, the hospital hallway was no longer a corridor of machines and antiseptic. It was a sanctuary built out of breath and heartbeat. When she pulled away, there were tears on both their faces, and Nathan whispered, "I'm not going anywhere, Emma. Not ever again." The scare changed something fundamental between them. It stripped away the last layers of hesitation and left only truth. Nathan moved into the spare room a week later, not as a guest, not as a savior, but as part of the family that had waited for him to catch up. There were awkward mornings and burned dinners, laughter that sometimes turned into arguments, arguments that turned into laughter again. They learned to speak plainly, to forgive quickly, to leave room for grace. Emma discovered that love after hurt is a craft. It asks for patience, for humor, for a willingness to be wrong without running. Nathan discovered that fatherhood is not an inheritance, but a practice. Bedtime stories, scraped knees, and long talks about dinosaurs and bravery. The day Jaime's school hosted its spring fair, the 3 of them went together. The park was filled with balloons and the scent of popcorn, children darting between booths, and teachers shouting raffles through microphones. Emma watched Nathan kneel to help Jaime aim at the ring toss, his laughter carrying above the noise, and she felt something inside her settle for good. When the boy finally won a small silver medal and ran back shouting, "We did it, Dad!" Nathan froze for a heartbeat, eyes shining with the weight of the word. He looked at Emma as if asking permission, and she nodded, her smile trembling. That one syllable, spoken by a child without ceremony, was the final stitch in a wound 5 years deep. Later that evening, when the fair lights dimmed and they walked home through streets humming with the last echoes of laughter, Jaime skipped ahead between them, holding both their hands. The street lamps painted their shadows long across the pavement, three shapes that moved as one. Emma glanced up at Nathan, and he met her eyes with a look that said more than any vow. We made it back. They did not speak because some promises are too sacred for words. They are meant to be lived, day by day, choice by choice. That night, after Jaime fell asleep clutching his medal, Emma stood by the window watching the city lights flicker like 1,000 beating hearts. Nathan came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, his breath warm against her neck. "Do you ever think about how close we came to missing this?" he murmured. She nodded, leaning back against him. "Every day. But maybe we had to lose each other first to learn how to stay." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Then let's never forget how to begin again." Outside, the first rain of spring began to fall, soft and steady, washing the world clean. Inside, a woman who had once run from heartbreak and a man who had once chased everything but home stood together in the quiet. Their son asleep down the hall, their lives finally stitched into one rhythm. The ghosts of regret still hovered somewhere in the corners, but they had lost their teeth. The house was too full of laughter now. And when morning came, bringing sunlight through the curtains and the smell of coffee and crayons and a child's voice calling them to breakfast, Emma turned to Nathan with a smile that carried every mile they had traveled to arrive here. "We're late for life," she said softly. He kissed her temple and whispered back, "Then let's hurry and live it." The kitchen filled with the clatter of dishes and the small music of a boy retelling dreams, and the three of them began another ordinary day, the kind that, after everything, felt extraordinary enough to last forever.